At the last recording, we went into a brief introduction on common perspectives in communication, which is really important for those of us in the wedding and the event space. Because if you accept the thesis that we're first and foremost salespeople and marketers, then we will realize that communication is our number one tool that we use in drumming up business. Because it's not as if I'm going to throw out my Instagram handle into the universe or just throw out samples of my albums and the frames and things like that. And these things are going to drum up business in themselves. Eventually, I'm going to have to speak to someone, and that is the case if you are a wedding planner or a cake artist or an MC or you're into pyro. So we all have to use one form of communication or the other, whether it's in spoken form or it's written form, email, text message, whatever it is. Communication is our number one tool of the trade as wedding and event industry professionals. And so that's why we are on this leg right now on communication. So if I remember correctly, yesterday I think I pointed out that communication is cyclical and it's not linear. So it's not like how we were taught early on in primary school that communications is A talking to B and that's the end of the story. But it's more of a communications loop where A talks to B and then there's feedback and B feedbacks to A and A refines the message and the circle goes on over and over and over again. Or is it the cycle? I'm not sure if it's the cycle goes on or the circle goes on. So whichever is the more appropriate term, just fill in the blanks accordingly. So yesterday we went over the first two elements in the communications matrix. Remember, I pointed out that this is not the technically correct thing you will find if you happen to look through a book on mass media, media communications, and those sorts of things. So if you're someone who is a communications professional because you study these courses in school, then forgive me for greatly abridging all the things that we're going to talk about here today. And if you happen to have a younger sibling who is still in university right now and is studying some of these things, they're going to listen to the episode and say, oh no, this guy cut out a whole bunch of stuff. So yes, they are correct that this is greatly abridged and not everything is here. But I think it has the essentials that we need to know and also to pass across the idea that when we are involved in communications, we have to consider more than just A and B, which is I, the sender, and then B, the potential customer, who it is that I'm talking to, or rather that we are talking to, that there are a lot more elements involved. So at the last episode, we looked at the source and the message, and I just want to do a quick freestyle about how these things are important and how these things are critical. So first off, the source in the communications matrix, the source, and the whole point about considering the source, which is you, by the way, is that we want to be, our chief consideration here is how clear is the message. So before we start the process of, creating that marketing campaign or creating that Instagram post or sending out that email, we have to be clear on what the intent is. And then the second part, the second item in the matrix is the message. That's the information that you give and what you intend to pass across. So I'm sure you can get a sense right now that intent is key when you're thinking about these first two elements of the matrix. So your intent is key and it's something that you have to put front and center, and that is what determines whether you have a fruitful communications process at the end of the day. Because a whole lot of us attend wedding expos, for instance, and we don't have clear intent or clear ideas about what it is that we intend to achieve and what we intend to pass across. And then you have people running around saying that wedding expos don't work and they're a waste of time. So the wedding expo is not going to work, and it is not going to be a good use of your time if you are not clear on what your message is and if you don't have any strong intent about what it is that you're trying to pass across. So I can't give you what the ideal intent would be for attending a wedding expo, for instance. But the last time that I attended, I've tried different variations, so I'll just give you what my last variation was. The last time I attended a wedding expo, my intent was to get people to see samples, to gauge and find out if they are interested, and then agree to another meeting where we can have a profitable discussion. Because I'm sure you figured out from the podcast that I'm a little more reserved. Yeah, let me put it that way. I'm a little more reserved. So I can't handle conversations in those market-like settings where the music is blaring really loud. And if you've attended wedding expos, you know that typically there are 2 or 3 DJs there, each of them trying to outdo each other. They're competing, so each one keeps on increasing the noise. And I don't think it's a conducive atmosphere to have business conversations, because basically you're there trying to shout into the ear of your clients and they're trying to shout back. It's not a good way to make, it's not the perfect context in which you can make a good impression. And then plus, with the current situation of the coronavirus, it's not a healthy thing to do, in my own opinion, to lean close to somebody's ear and then start shouting at the top of your voice, and the person does the same. I mean, Lord knows what it is that you guys are exchanging. So, so the bottom line is, I showed up for wedding expos last year in 2020. So far, we haven't had any in 2021. The big 3 that I mentioned in the beginning, neither of them have picked off. That's Hilton Hotel, Brides and Babies, and what was the third? The Wed Expo. Okay, the Wed Expo hasn't been in Abuja for maybe 5-6 years. So let's say the big 2. So neither of them are back in the saddle of organizing wedding expos. So we haven't done any for this year. So that was my intent going in, and you can see that now that I have clear intent and a clear message, I can expect some clear results when attending wedding expos, because if the whole point was to gauge interest and to secure an appointment, then you can be sure that every single thing that I say, materials that I give, text messages that I send afterwards, or follow-up emails would be intended towards that whole process. I mean, that whole next step, which is, number 1, make sure they're interested, and number 2, secure a meeting. So being clear on the message and your intent is absolutely essential to having successful communications at the end of the day. So remember that it is cyclical and not linear. So if I get them to come for that first meeting and I gauge that they are interested, then it's a success. And then the feedback loop continues. They come for the meeting, I get a sense of what it is that they're interested in, and then the salvos go back and forth. I communicate, they respond, there's feedback, and then this cycle keeps going on and on and on. So, so that is just a little case study that I decided to freestyle on to show you guys that what we're talking about here isn't being excessively academic, and we're not just tossing out ideas just to show that we went to school or that we know how to read books, but these things are absolutely important. So the first 2 things in the communications matrix, the source and the message, we have to be absolutely clear on what the message is, and we need to have high intent. Consider clearly what the information is that you want to pass across, and the effect that you expect from that. And from this example that I've given, I'm sure you can see that it's important across whatever stage that you're involved in, whether you are there at the wedding expo, or whether you've had the first client meeting, or the meeting after they pay a deposit, whatever it is, we have to keep these things front and center at all times. So we're done with step 1. Remember, high intent. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer, Tavishima Ayede. I will catch you guys at the next recording.